Hi, I'm Dan Carter-Passy. Welcome to my new series on model building. Now, in the past, when I was elsewhere on YouTube, I used to work on one model at a time. I decided for this series I'm going to try something different because probably like a lot of you, I tend to work on more than one thing at a time most of the time. So I've decided I'm going to model an entire consist, all 5 engines that were on the front of a train that I photographed in Truckee, California back in 1993. Before I start something like this, I need to know where I'm going. I'll need to research the prototype, plan what I'm going to do to the models, and prepare the models. Let's take a closer look at each of these steps. Unfortunately, I didn't take a lot of train pictures back in the early to mid-1990s, which is the era I usually model. I did take some though. While I was on vacation in the spring or summer of 1993, I came across a freight train stopped in Truckee, California, headed westbound toward Donner Pass. It was a long grain train and was split so that it wouldn't block the grade crossing, and had apparently been sitting there for some time. There were 5 locomotives on the front of the train, and ever since then I've wanted to model the entire consist. Leading was Southern Pacific SD45R 7482. SP's SD45Rs were rebuilt from older SD45s. This one had since lost its SP light package but had ditch lights and a beacon installed. The second engine was Cotton Belt 7787, a B30-7. This one had also lost its light package but gained a beacon. Third from the front was EMDX 769, a GP38-2. This was the first lease unit that I can recall seeing in person. Lease power was fairly common on the SP in the early 1990s. After that came SP 7479, another SD45R. This one had lost its light package and had a beacon but no ditch lights. It also had far-style radiator grills. Last in line was Conrail SD40 6283, probably also on lease. This is the one and only Conrail unit that I can recall seeing in person. Now, unfortunately, for some reason at the time, I chose not to walk to the other side of the train and take pictures of the locomotives from that angle. Thankfully, I've been able to find other photos of these locomotives to fill in the gaps. I can't stress enough how important research is to building accurate models. I look for photos online, and sometimes I purchase slides on eBay or at train shows. Motive Power annuals and other books are also great reference material. If I hadn't already decided to model these specific locomotives, and say for example I just wanted to model a couple SP SD45Rs, I'd pick units that I could find the most photos of. When doing a complex project, it's important to make a plan. Let's take a look at each model and what I want to accomplish with them. Now, at one point years ago, I built a model of SP 7482, but it was made from an old rail power shell on a Protopower West chassis, and my modeling skills weren't quite up to where they are now. It used bulbs instead of LEDs for lights, didn't have see-through fans, and lacked some other details that I now like to include on my models. I thought about it for a while, but I realized that to make that model something I'd still want, I'd have to completely rebuild it. Also, the rail power shells were good for their time, but had some detail issues that would take a lot of work to fix. If I needed to go that far, I figured I might as well start over, so that engine went off to eBay. So maybe I should call the new one second 7482? Nah, I think I'll stick with plain 7482. Anyway, I'm planning to use this undecorated Kato SD45 as the basis for this build, but more on that in a bit. This is an Atlas B30-7, which I started on a while back and then put aside. It came with a QSI sound decoder, which I removed and sold on eBay. As with all of these models, my intent is to use Loxound DCC sound decoders. It's already decorated for Cotton Belt and is just one number off from the engine I want. However, it lacks some of the light package and other details on the real engine. My initial thought was to try to remove the numbers and keep the factory paint, which I started to do. Unfortunately, sometimes that technique works and sometimes it doesn't. It would be really hard to fix this smudging. Because of the difficulty I've had in trying to remove the numbers, and with all the other modifications I'll be making, I've decided to repaint the locomotive completely. Essentially, this will be a from-the-ground-up build. The real engine lost some of its lights by 1993, but the mounts and cover plates were still there, and I want the model to reflect that. Also, the engineer's window should be a little larger than standard. This was one of those engines that had an L-shaped window initially, and then got converted back to 2 panes later. The plan for this one is to reuse most of the stock shell and add SP-specific details, then install DCC, sound, and custom LED lighting. Okay, so this one is a bit of a cheat. It's already done. I made this model of EMDX 769 from a Proto 2000 GP38-2. Since I built it, I think Athearn has also released this engine in their Genesis line. This model is finished, and I can't think of much more I'd do to it. It has Canon fans, a Canon cab and short hood, and numerous other aftermarket details. It's equipped with a Loc Sound Select DCC sound decoder, custom LED lighting, and it runs well and sounds good. It's custom painted and decorated with microscale decals. The pilots have hoses and uncoupling levers and KD scale couplers. The trucks have brake lines. The rear of the long hood has wire grab irons. I plan to build the other models to this same standard. Since I'm modeling two nearly identical SD45Rs, I thought it would be interesting to use two completely different SD45 models and see how they end up looking when it's all done. As I mentioned earlier, for 7482, I'm going to use this undecorated Kato SD45. Stripping paint from Kato shells can be problematic, so using an undecorated unit will save some time. For 7479, I'll be using this Proto 2000 SD45. With apologies to Seaboard Coastline fans, this one is going to take a bath in some paint stripper. One of the detailed differences between the two SD45Rs is the radiator grills. 7482 has the more usual chicken wire type grills that are standard on both models. 7479, however, had far-style grills in 1993. Canon makes a part for those which fit the Proto 2000 model, which is the main reason I chose to use that model for 7479. For both models, the plan is to replace the entire cab, subbase, and short hood with Canon parts. I'll use Canon fans and other detail parts, plus add custom lighting, sound, and all the rest. I'll use high-tech details cab fronts to get the correct SP window arrangement. Like the B30-7, these SD45Rs originally had L-shaped windows that were converted back to two panes. I'll also use the SP grip battery box door covers from High-Tech. Both of these models are going to get Canon EMD cab interiors. I'm going to build these two in parallel so that we can compare them to each other at each stage as we progress through the build. So this one is also a bit of a cheat. It's mostly done. Mostly. This one started life as a Kato SD40 and has also been custom painted and detailed. Unfortunately, I didn't put Canon fans on this one, and that's become my standard. When I built it, I used an old Loc Sound 3.5 sound decoder, which I've since removed. The model is set up for LED lighting, but currently has no LEDs installed. In fact, it won't even run right now because the motor is not hooked up to anything. The couplers stick out too far on stock Kato SD40s and SD45s, so I want to modify the pilot slightly to move the couplers inward. I'll do this on 7482 also, but I have to be more careful with this one since the pilots are already detailed. I especially don't want to damage my custom-made Conrail style uncoupling levers. These are fiber optic strands for the headlights and marker lights. Eventually I'll install new LEDs inside the shell and connect them to the fiber optics. This was the first engine that I lit in this way, and I like the results so much that it's become my standard. My plan for this model is to upgrade the fans and coupler mounts without wrecking everything else. That will be a bit of a challenge, especially since this was painted with Flowquill Conrail Blue, a paint you can't get anymore. I'm hoping I still have some stashed away somewhere and that it's still viable. I also want to light up the number boards, something I made provision for when I built the model but never actually did. Once that's done, I'll add a Canon EMD cab interior. Then I'll install a newer Loc Sound decoder. So I need to build 3 engines completely and rework a 4th. Where to begin? Before I do anything, I want to make sure I stay at least somewhat organized. I don't want parts to get mixed up or misplaced. I'm going to use these containers to keep the parts for each model together. You could really use any kind of container that's handy, or even plastic bags. I like these hard plastic containers because they will help protect the parts. I'm going to make a label and mark each box with the road number for a locomotive. Then I'll keep all the parts for that locomotive in the box when I'm not working on them. Eventually, when this project is done, I can remove the label and reuse the box for another project. For 7482, I don't have much to worry about yet, as all I'll be using is the shell, sill, and the chassis. I'm not going to use the cab subbase, factory handrails, or other factory parts. Stuff I'm not using can go in the scrap box. I like to mark the shell and chassis with a Sharpie so that I know that these parts are for 7482. Even though this is a simple step, it feels like a milestone to me. This is no longer just an undecorated model with no identity. It's now my model of SP7482. I won't be using the factory light board either. Since 7787 is already partially disassembled, I want to collect the parts and make sure I have everything in one place. I'll be reusing many of the factory parts from this model. I'll label the inside of the shell also, but I'll wait until after I've stripped the paint. Since EMD Leasing 769 is done, I'm just going to put it away in a storage box to keep it safe for now. Older Kato and Proto 2000 boxes aren't very good for storing super detailed locomotives, so it's important to have an alternative. This is especially true if you're like me and don't currently have a layout built for the engine to occupy. This is a box from Grand Central Gems. I use these to store a lot of my custom locomotives. The plastic around the engine keeps small details from snagging on the foam. The foam is good protection for the models. The engines are stored upright, not in their sides as with some other boxes. I've had good luck with these and seldom have anything break in storage. For 7479, I won't be using the handrails, fans, cab, and many other parts. I'll remove those and put them in my scrap box. If this were anything other than a Southern Pacific engine, I might consider reusing the handrails. However, I'd have to make so many changes that I might as well just build new ones. On this model, there are two screws that hold the body to the shell. One is under one of the trucks and one is by the fuel tank. Usually on models like this you can tell because the screws will be offset to one side on either end. I need to make some cuts with a chisel blade to remove the little tabs that hold in the radiator grills. The forward radiator grills have gaps behind them, so it's easy to poke them out. For the radiator grills toward the rear, I need to cut some holes with my motor tool. This will allow me to get another tool in there and poke them out. On this model, I also won't be using the factory electronics, so I'm going to remove those. I'm also going to disassemble Conrail 6283. I have to be very careful with this one as I definitely plan to reuse almost everything. This model has custom-built brass handrails. Thankfully, I didn't glue them to this model, so they shouldn't be too hard to remove. I want them out of the way so I don't damage them while working on the fans. So that looks like a good place to leave it for this time. We'll pick up the build again with the next episode. Thanks for watching, and I hope you're enjoying it.